You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. In every just society, the law is meant to serve as a shield and not as a weapon. It exists to protect citizens from the arbitrary exercise and misuse of power. And one of the oldest protections written into American law is the principle that no new law or amendment of existing law can be applied retroactively to punish conduct that occurred in the past. This principle is not just a technical rule. It is the foundation of fairness, woven into the Constitution itself under the ex post facto clause. But in one case, and that is the case against R. Kelly, that sacred principle was ignored. New laws were allowed to work backwards. The story of how this happened is one of the most disturbing examples of how public pressure, political ambition and moral panic can override the rule of law even in a nation that prides itself on due process. To understand the violation that occurred, we must begin with the meaning of the statute of limitations. In criminal law, the statute of limitations sets a fixed time window within which prosecutors must bring charges after an alleged offense. If they fail to do so, the law declares the case expired forever. This isn't a loophole. It's a safeguard. Over time, evidence decays, memories fade and witnesses disappear. The longer the delay, the less reliable any testimony becomes. The law recognizes this reality by imposing strict deadlines to prevent wrongful convictions. And so for decades, Illinois enforced these statutes carefully. For most sex crimes, there was a 10-year limitation period, meaning that if a person was accused years later after that deadline had passed, the case could not legally proceed. This limitation wasn't designed to favor the accused. It was designed to protect the integrity of justice itself. In 2013, however, under mounting national focus on sexual abuse scandals, Illinois lawmakers amended their statute of limitations for certain sex crimes involving minors. The change was clear. Prosecutors would now have more time, and in some cases unlimited time, to pursue charges that arose from alleged conduct involving children. But what was also clear was that this amendment was meant to apply prospectively, meaning only to offenses that occurred after the amendment's passage. That distinction is not optional. It's constitutional. The ex post facto clause forbids lawmakers from turning back the clock to revive prosecutions that had already expired under the old law. If a case was already dead, it remained dead and no amendment could legally resurrect it. In R. Kelly's Chicago case, prosecutors did exactly what the Constitution forbids. They charged him with conduct that allegedly occurred decades earlier. Alleged acts from the 1990s and early 2000s, long after the statute of limitations had already expired. Under the law as it stood during those years, every one of those charges would have been time-barred. They were beyond reach, closed by law and sealed by time. Yet prosecutors chose to move forward anyway, citing the 2013 amendment as justification. They argued that because the statute had been extended, they could now reach back into the past all the way to allegations that had legally expired over a decade before. In doing so, they turned the law on its head. The Constitution demands that laws move forward. But here the amendment was used in reverse, and not as a future protection for potential victims, but as a retroactive weapon against a man the public had already condemned. The retroactive use of a statute like this is not just unfair. It's unconstitutional. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled in cases like Stogner v. California of 2003 that extending a criminal statute of limitations after it has expired, and then using that extension to prosecute someone, violates the ex post facto clause. In Stogner, the court held that once the original time limit runs out, the government loses its right to prosecute forever. And no later law can revive that right. The Illinois 2013 amendment did not repeal that constitutional protection, and yet prosecutors in R. Kelly's case pretended as though it did. By charging him with time-barred offenses, they effectively asked the courts to ignore Stogner, and to ignore the Constitution itself simply because public opinion demanded a conviction. Some might ask, why should an expiration date matter if the allegations are supposedly serious? The answer lies in the fundamental balance between accusation and proof. Statutes of limitations exist to prevent injustice and to stop prosecutors from building cases on nothing more than old memories, faded documents and public outrage. When evidence is fresh, truth can be tested. When decades pass, truth becomes impossible to verify. By 2019, when R. Kelly was charged in Illinois, the state was relying on alleged conduct nearly 20 years old. No physical evidence. No contemporaneous reports. Just recollections and narratives formed long after the alleged events. That is precisely the kind of prosecution the statute of limitations was created to prevent. R. Kelly's defense argued that the charges should be dismissed on constitutional grounds, citing both Illinois precedent and the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Stogner. They maintained that applying the 2013 amendment to conduct from the 1990s was a clear violation of due process and the ex post facto clause. But the courts chose to overlook these arguments, influenced by the magnitude of public sentiment surrounding the case. Judges and prosecutors alike appeared unwilling to apply the law, impartially fearing backlash if they appeared to side with a man already vilified in the media. In other words, the law was sacrificed for optics and justice was replaced by symbolism. The implications extend far beyond one man. If lawmakers or prosecutors can use a new law to revive old cases, then the concept of finality in law disappears. Anyone famous or not could be targeted decades later, long after evidence has vanished, and long after witnesses have forgotten. Besides, even the defendant himself may have lost potential witnesses and evidence for his own defense. That is why Stogner remains such a critical precedent. It affirms that time limits are not mere technicalities to be shifted around whenever it's convenient. They are constitutional boundaries protecting every citizen from government overreach. To violate that principle in one case is therefore to weaken it in all. It is telling that other defendants in Illinois accused of similar historical conduct had their charges dismissed on the same grounds that should have protected R. Kelly, yet his case was treated differently. Why? Because unlike others, his case was driven not by law but by politics and public demand. Prosecutors seized on the 2013 amendment as a symbolic opportunity. A chance to appear tough on a high-profile figure even if it meant bending the rules. And the courts, perhaps wary of being accused of leniency, allowed that bending to stand. But justice cannot depend on who the defendant is. The Constitution does not bend for headlines. Due process means that every defendant is entitled to fair notice of the law as it existed at the time of the alleged conduct. A person cannot be expected to defend himself against rules that did not yet exist. When R. Kelly lived under the old Illinois Code, the limitation clock was fixed. Once that time expired, he, like anyone else, had the right to rely on that finality. By undoing that right, the state rewrote history. It effectively told him that new laws and amendments can change not only the future but the past as well. That is not justice. That is legislative tyranny. This case stands as a dangerous precedent for the erosion of legal certainty. If courts allow retroactive prosecution once, they can allow it again. And if they allow it for a man like R. Kelly, they can allow it for anyone who falls out of favor with public opinion. Today it may be R. Kelly. Tomorrow, it could be anyone accused in the heat of public outrage. It can actually be the president himself. This is how justice loses its anchor, when emotion replaces evidence and when the law is reshaped to fit the moment. In the end, what makes this case unique is that it demonstrates a law not working forward to protect victims but backwards to punish a man whose legal window had already closed. This is not how a lawful society operates. Laws are not meant to travel through time. They are not meant to resurrect dead cases or to override settled protections. The 2013 statute was written for the future. Its misuse in R. Kelly's case turned it into a tool of the past, which in itself is against the law of this land. The only case where new laws worked backwards serves as a warning. A reminder that the Constitution means nothing if it is only applied when convenient. R. Kelly's prosecution under an expired statute represents not just a miscarriage of justice for one individual, but a direct challenge to the principles that define American law. If statutes of limitations can be undone, if expired rights can be revived at will like this, then no one's liberty is safe. The ex post facto clause was written to stop exactly this kind of abuse. To make sure laws never become weapons against the past. Therefore, when courts ignore that command, they don't just fail one man. They fail the rule of law itself. Because if laws can work backwards for one person, they can work backwards for all of us. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say? To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.